Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bass Tales. Today, we're going to talk about catching your biggest largemouth bass and how to accomplish that. We all want to be a George Perry and have a world record, but basically, I went this year, I started a little personal quest on trying to up my biggest bass and catch bigger bass. So, I'm going to tell you all the things I went through and how I got the idea for it. So basically, this football player, Teddy Bruschi, he was on the New England Patriots for many years. Super great guy, super great player. But I follow him on Facebook, and he's an avid fisherman. He fishes in my area down the canal. So a post that Teddy Bruschi made on his Facebook page was him fishing down in Florida and catching a good-sized bass. And I just happened to just look through the comments. There's a few comments on there congratulating him. And then there was someone that caught a 10-pound bass in Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is where I live. And he said, I'll take you to this secret spot I have where I caught this fish, and there's multiple big bass there, 10 pounds. So got me thinking. I'm like, there are places capable of making big fish more than other areas. And I actually messaged the guy hoping maybe he'd give me the spot, but he wouldn't give it to me. He had it down as Billington Sea, which is a popular bass fishing spot in Plymouth, but it wasn't that location. So I did a little Google search on him and found out he put up a YouTube video. It was him actually snorkeling and taking a video underwater, and you could see these big bass under trees. It was like a short, 3-minute video. Didn't have many views. I just happened to Google his name and say fishing, and it came up. So I got a little more info from looking at the clarity of the water. I didn't see anything above the water, but from looking at the ground and the trees, I've fished a lot of local ponds. I have an idea of maybe where it is. And I've fished there before and caught big fish there. So basically from there, I was like, well, there are 10-pound bass in my area. I'd love to catch that. My record at the time was about 5 pounds. So I started this journey of, looking this stuff up. And actually recently, about 3 weeks ago, I caught my biggest largemouth bass at the time. And it's over 6 pounds, and it was 22 and a half inches long. I'm on the right start because I've always been into more catching multiple fish than going after trophy size fish. Everyone wants to catch a better personal best. So that's how I kind of came up with this episode. I started thinking, I want to come up with a plan here, kind of a game plan of the best spot to fish and how to fish it. So I have the best chance of catching a big largemouth bass. So it's funny, in Massachusetts, they have state pins. And you get a pin if you catch, at the time I didn't know, if it's over 21 inches, a largemouth, you can get a pin. And then they have, at the end of the year, this is for the catch and release. And at the end of the year, they get, last year it was like a 25 inch that was caught, something like that. But if you have the largest, you win like a gold pin, and you get to go down to the Mass Wildlife, and you get like a certificate saying that you had the record that year. So they have one that you can bring in and certify the actual Mass Wildlife. If you bring it into them, you can have them weigh it there, and you can get that as the biggest fish as a weighed one. Or you can do a catch and release style one where you just tape measure it. So I don't really, unless I catch something that's like 8 pounds or something ridiculous, I probably wouldn't kill the fish. I'm going to put the fish back, let it breed, hopefully make more big fish like it in the future. So yeah, I put my big one back. I got some pictures, some measurements on it. Yeah, it was interesting. And so that's basically what I was thinking. Like, how am I going to set this up so I have a better chance of catching a new personal best? And hey, you never know, you might follow these ideas and tips that I've come up with. You might end up breaking a state, or hey, if you're down Texas or Florida, maybe you'll break a world record. Who knows? You have to be over 22 pounds something to beat George Perry's record. Let's go. Let's talk about this. So basically, this is the thing. People will tell you, like, oh, use this bait, this technique. This will catch you the biggest bass. I'm going to go through what the most important thing is. It's the location. It comes down that it has to be a certain location where the fish are going to be larger. There's going to be less smaller fish. You got to do some research in your area, wherever you are. Location research is step one. You want to look up and try to find smaller ponds or locations that don't get much pressure and they're hard to reach maybe sometimes. You can start that process. You could start looking at Google Earth. I started looking at some Google Earth images. There's a ton of natural ponds that are all around my area here in the southeast of Massachusetts. Then, so you can pick some areas that way, start thinking about it. Then there's is another thing. Like I saw that post with Teddy Bruschi and saw that 10-pound bass that the guy caught in my town. So you could follow, and I've always done this, you can follow social Facebook groups like fishing, whatever your state is, there'll be a fishing thing. You'll see people post pictures of all sorts of bass if you go on a bass one or just fish in general. There might be a kayak style one. They have fishing group pages, all sorts of things for your area. You can probably find it. There's an app called Fish Brain. It's kind of like a social media for people that just post pictures of their fish, and they'll give you the location and like maybe the lure, whatever they put in. You can pretty much get most of the info. It's a free site. You can upgrade and it gives you more information if you upgrade about the location and all that was caught there and what time of day, but it costs money. I don't pay for that. I just look at it. So it'll like ping your phone if there was a new catch nearby. So it's kind of good. So when your phone gets pinged early in the year, you know, oh, the bass are starting to get active. So I'll switch from fishing from trout and I'll switch over to bass because I enjoy bass fishing more than trout fishing. So it takes a little bit for them to get active. You can fish for bass year round up here, and it's just very difficult in the winter. It's not as enjoyable. You can follow people on this Fish Brain app, and you can get ideas from them, seeing people catch large fish, and maybe they put the location, maybe they don't. Some people don't want to give out the location, but maybe from the pictures you recognize the area. And there's also another way to look into maybe where big fish could be. Nowadays, you could do a Google search and look up. Sorry if you're hearing that. That's my bird in the background, but he's a little loud sometimes. I'm going to go try to quiet him down, I think, in a second. Okay, back now. Got that bird covered, so hopefully he'll stay quiet for a little bit until I can uncover him. So you can search Google. That's another good idea. So you can bring up a location. Say you have an idea like Mill Pond or something. You can Google that. There'll be web pages of people talking about what they caught there, stuff like that. So you do some research that way. A new thing nowadays, you got AI. So right now, I don't know. I haven't used AI. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it could be devastating in the future. Who knows? I don't know much about AI, but that could be a future type thing that you could use. Or even now, the Chat GBT, you could ask them. They search the web better than a web browser. And maybe you talk into it, say, in this town, where were the biggest bass caught? Maybe that brings it right up. There's other ways, a lot of ways on the internet to look up different fishing areas that you think might hold bigger fish. So in other places, you can check local tackle shops, and they will give you sometimes ideas to owners. They want repeat business. They'll be friendly. Ask them, tell them you're in a search for a new personal best. I'm looking for a good spot that you think I might be able to get a larger size largemouth bass. They'll help you out. So that's another spot. So note that down. Another thing is go on your state records page and look at the recent records. I know Massachusetts, I'm pretty sure, I don't look at every state, but other states probably have it. And you can look back, it's about 10 years, I think, on the Massachusetts ones. Look into food to support larger bass, a stocked rainbow trout. That could be a good food source for larger bass. If they also stock brown trout will eat the smaller bass. if there's less smaller bass, there's more food for the larger bass. So that is a big key there. So look into places that stock rainbow trout and also brown trout. And next, you want to look something if you're near the ocean, like we're right on the ocean where I am. So you want to look into if they get any heron or alewives coming up. They come up rivers from the ocean and they'll spawn and have their babies in the fresh water, and then they go back to the ocean. Bass will feed on them and some of the babies. That's another thing you want to look into. If it has a river that comes from an ocean, and if there are heron, blueback heron, or alewives that go up there to spawn, follow that river. Where it ends is usually where they go. They usually go to the last river areas or ponds where it kind of ends, that pond or lake. That's usually where they're going to go most of the time, because they just have that instinct to keep going till basically they get to the top of that river where they can lay those eggs. So that's another food source. So after you kind of go through those little researches process, so that would be like the step one, the pre-location research that we just kind of went over. Take notes on that, get some ideas, maybe pick out a couple ponds, more than one, say maybe this one, maybe that one. Then you want to do a little more research. So this is before you go fishing there. And you want to go to, again, maybe a state website, and it'll have information. You can look at a topographical map, and it'll give you different points of basically the depth of the water. So you can look for a point that drops off. You can look for little creeks and coves. You can hey, this looks like a good spot. Maybe a large fish could be. So you want to do that research. Print out that map, mark some spots on it before you go there. They might have a good spot where they spawn. You want to look at that area. Humps out in the middle of the water where the water level goes up and it's high and then it's deep on each side. You're not going to be able to see really structure, but you'll see the different depths. So that's something to look at before you go. So now number 3 would be the fun part. You actually get out there, and these few areas you picked, you get to fish them. And this is where you're really going to find out if they're good or not. Hopefully maybe you go out there in the first cast and you get a new personal best. Usually it doesn't happen that way. You have to put a little bit of time into it. When you get to the location, like we talked about, you have those marked spots on your map. Try fishing some of those spots. At this point, I wouldn't go too crazy with your gear. You want to see what's out there. Just go with whatever your basic fishing gear is. See what you're catching. If you keep catching multiple small bass like over and over again, I know a lot of places, they're fun to fish, but you just keep getting 1 and 2 pounders and you never get anything over 3 pounds, and there's multiple fish. Yeah, that's fun to catch, but that's a hard place. There might only be 1 or 2 big bass in that whole pond. If you're getting a lot of small fish and multiple fish, it's harder to produce larger fish. So when you go to this place, you kind of want to catch fish, but you want to catch decent sized fish and not tons of them. So then there's a better chance that there is a few large fish there. Also, catching other species. The pond that I caught my personal best at, I caught huge yellow perch there. My wife caught the biggest pickerel that I ever saw, and that was at that same pond. If it has big pike in it, there's a good chance it might be big bass in it. So if you see large sizes of other fish, then there's a good chance there's large bass in there too. It's a good support for those fish, and then those big bass can eat those big yellow perch. So you don't want to have a place where there's a ton of small bass and you're catching them left and right. You want a place where you're going to catch a couple fish that are good size, so that'll put you on the right path. Not saying that you can't go to a place where you catch multiple fish and catch a big one. I'm just saying it might be a lot harder to find a big one in that type of situation. You want to find a place where there's not a lot of tiny fish that are going to take the food source away from the real big fish. Also, I don't really have this. On my 16-foot boat, I got a basic old depth finder, but nowadays people got these live scopes and fancy type electronics on some of these bass boats. You might be in that situation. I'm not. So you can use that to scope around for structure, even look at the fish and see them on these live scopes. So you'll be ahead of the game if you have one of those. It'll be a little bit of searching you can do, but you'll be able to see a little better. The other thing is, if you're in a smaller boat, a kayak, get some good polarized glasses on, start searching under, look for points where water drops off, look for trees under the water or big boulders, stuff where bass would like to hang out. If you're on like flats or area like that, you're going to see a big rock or a big tree under the water. Note that, put that on your map, and try fishing those type of area. Even if you don't get anything that day, go back another day. They might be off that structure, but a lot of times they'll go back to that structure at certain times. That is a key there too. So a lot of this is just feeling out the area, basically just putting in a little bit of time. That's part of it. It's just research, and it's going to be fun because you're still going to go out there and catch fish, and that's what it is. It's about having fun. Don't stress out if you don't catch a huge fish right away. As long as you're out there having fun, enjoy the time on the water. That's what fishing's about. It's the de-stress. It's going to be a good time. It's a fun hobby. Don't stress out that you have to catch some huge fish because you're following these little ideas. But this will put you in a spot, hopefully, that you have that chance to catch bigger fish. Let's go on to part number 4 here that I have, and that is gear. After you find this spot, say you find 1 or 2, if you can find one spot, you're like, man, there's a good food source here. I've caught some good, decent sized fish here, but there's not a ton of fish biting. I've seen other species of fish. I caught a huge pike there. There's a good chance there's big bass there, and probably a good amount of them. So this is where you want to invest in your gear. This is stuff that people are gonna do mainly if they're targeting just big bass. You could fish with just a regular medium rod with light line. I caught mine on a medium rod with 6-pound test. I'm not out there trying to basically just hunt down huge bass. I could do that. I enjoy catching the other ones as well. You don't need to do this exactly. If you want to up your chances, you want to change your gear up a little bit and have less chance of losing a huge fish if you get one, which is sad because it does happen. I'll tell you a story a little bit on a technique here, how I lost one a couple days, maybe it was a week ahead of that. It was definitely 5 pounds, if not more, this fish. So I'll tell you that story in a bit. So let's get through the gear. You want something that's like a medium heavy or a heavy rod. You definitely want to have a net with you if possible. That's always good to have. You want to run heavier line, like 10 pounds or heavier. I like the mono for the topwater fishing, and I like the cold poly lines for basically everything else. I like that they have a little bit of stretch to them, so they're a little forgiving, and they have very strong knot strength. You might want to use a heavy braid if you're fishing into like lily pads, weeds, where you're really pulling them out of stuff. Yeah, you just go with a straight. Bird is just whistling like crazy, even covered. Sorry about that. So you might want to go with a braid in that type of situation. Next, you want to have certain baits. This is if you're just targeting large fish. You want to get something like large swim baits, glide baits, stuff like that. Fish those. You're not going to catch a lot of fish on them, though. Just so you know, that's just basically for large fish. Also, they're very expensive. So if you're new to this, probably don't want to go spend $25 plus on a lure. Some of these lures are $200, which is crazy for these swim baits, but they got real popular. I believe out West California, catching the big fish in Japan. Remember watching one day this guy just casting off his boat with a huge swim bait, just targeting to try to catch big fish. Yeah, I don't know if I'd like. Yeah, you could catch some big fish, but where I am, you're not talking. There's not a lot of huge fish. Maybe this is better in Texas and California, but people do it around here, and they will catch big fish. But you're not going to catch much in between. You can do it. That's a good way to try to just target these bigger fish. Is a large swim bait. You could do larger soft baits like big worms. 6+ inches, bigger type crawfish baits, bigger soft baits, any type of soft bait. Texas rig it to get it down there. Obviously, you can rig it Carolina, free rig it. My personal best I caught the other day was just on a 6-inch Cinco. It was nothing fancy. So I was just in the right spot. I was at a point with a drop off, casted right in there, and I got hit right there on the first cast of that spot. Fished there another 30 minutes after that fish, didn't get nothing. But I got that fish. That was the only one I caught that day, and I was out there probably 4 hours. This is another big fish catching lure is a jitterbug. Jitterbugs are great at catching bigger fish at night. And next thing would be the extra little things. So this is where you want to get like a proper ruler, like a measuring board, because you can get that fish on there and get a measurement real quick. Where I had a little cheap tape measure and the thing just kept sliding out of my hand. It was a pain in the butt to measure that fish. I got it measured, obviously, but you couldn't hold it being one person. The fish was flopping around. I wanted to get back in the water. I got the measurement, but I couldn't get a good picture of it. And at the time, I didn't know exactly what the pin record was. I couldn't remember exactly. And it was 22 and a half. All I had to do was beat 21, but I didn't get a good picture of it with the tape measure because I didn't have the proper one. So get yourself a proper way to measure that fish if you're doing a catch and release on that type of fish for like a pin for the state, and get some good pictures. Another thing is a good scale. Obviously, that's tested. You want to get a weight too. So it's always good to have a proper measuring device for the weight and the length. Here's another trick too, and I'm going to pick one of these up, and I've heard good things about them. If you don't have a boat with a live well, you can get this thing called a donkey leash, and you can use that off a kayak, and it basically hooks on the fish's mouth, and you can leave it on the side of the boat and it won't escape. So you're not rushing around to get a measurement to get the fish back in the water. That's a good item to pick up. They're like $20. I'm actually going to pick one up in a future episode. I'll let you guys know what I think of it. I talked about sunglasses earlier for spotting different areas too. Look for areas when you're out there in the spawning season. You can even catch them off bed sometimes. It's real tricky to do that sometimes, but you'll see like spawning areas. So if there's an area where you see a bunch of bass spawning beds, that's a good spot to hit pre-spawn, during spawn. So you can come back to that spot after they're done spawning. They kind of leave that area, but they're always nearby. They kind of stay around that area. That's what most people believe. So you could come back and hit that area multiple times after and hopefully catch one of those big females there. Another thing, you could go with live bait. Lots of records were caught with live bait. I don't fish with live bait a lot, but I'm thinking next pre-spawn next year, I might do a little live bait fishing, get some golden shiners, stuff like that. You can catch some big fish on live bait. I think it takes a little bit of the fun out of it because you're not casting as much, but that gives you maybe a better chance of catching a largemouth. That's something to keep in mind as well. So when's the best chance of catching a large fish? So you'd want to go pre-spawn in spring in your location. It's depending where you are. If you're up north where I am, basically maybe mid-April into May. And I think the best fishing in my area is basically that April to June for your best chance of catching big ones. Not saying you can't catch them year round. You can catch big fish anytime, basically. But your best chance, if you catch them pre-spawn, they're filled with eggs, they're a little heavier. The big females are out there feeding before they spawn. That's the thing to keep in mind. Maybe January to April in like southern states and May to June in northern states. Basically, that's something to keep in mind. Watch the water temperature. Do a little research on that on your area to see when you think they're in that pre-spawn mode. Sometimes it's a little tough to catch them then, but there are some big fish, and that might be a good time to try the live bait. Try to go out if there's a full or a new moon, because the moon cycles will actually increase your chances of catching fish. And I'm bummed because I was planning to go out and try to catch a big one. I think it was about 4 or 5 weeks ago. There was a full moon, and of course that day it just poured and it was a windy bad storm, so I couldn't get out and fish that day. I was bumming, so I'm gonna have to wait till the next full or new moon to give that a try. Put it in your phone if you have a smartphone like everyone does nowadays. Put it on your calendar, pop it in there, full moon coming up, put a few months ahead, get out that day and fish if you can, or that night. And another thing, the fish basically are most active like 60 to 70 degrees. Another really good time to fish is before a cold front moving in. Fish will feed more before a cold front comes in. And now I'm going to get into another time when to go, but also kind of a technique here. And this is night fishing. This might give you your best chance of catching your biggest fish. This is something more when the water's warmer, they're more active, they're hitting top waters in our area. It's getting to that point where I'm recording this. It's early June. But you go out at night, and that jitterbug I talked about earlier, you got to use a black one. Don't use any other colors. At night, black works best for night fishing. So make sure you pick up a bigger black jitterbug. These jitterbugs, they're an old lure that not many people use anymore, so the fish don't see them much. That's a good one to try. They've caught many records over the years with these jitterbugs. I know records have been caught multiple states with this lure, and a lot of people don't know that or know of that lure. There's this guy called Jimmy Zinker. Seems like a real nice guy. You can follow him on Facebook, and that's all he fishes mainly is goes out at night and fishes jitterbugs. He's in Florida, and he's pulling in 7 to 11 pound fish roughly, but he catches a lot of them, and all he fishes is jitterbugs roughly. Sometimes he throws buzz baits, I believe, and worms, but mainly he fishes the old school jitterbugs they don't make anymore, called musky jitterbugs. And they make one that's called the Jitterbug XL, I think now, which is kind of like the musky jitterbug, but the original muskies were made years ago. They were made out of wood, and he modifies them. There was a guy before him, I can't think of the name, that used to catch large fish, and he basically read his book or his article and basically followed what he did, changed it around a little bit on his own. He's an interesting guy if you look him up, Jimmy Zinker, and he will also, like, if you come across an old musky jitterbug, they get a lot for him, I think, nowadays on eBay. You could send it to him, and he does little modifications that he believes will catch more fish. And I don't know what he charges or anything like that, but I know he is on Facebook, and you can contact him through Messenger on Facebook if you have any interest in doing that. Night fishing is a great way to catch some large fish, and it's fun too. I love night fishing. I don't get out enough, but I might have to be taking it up. I want to try to catch something bigger than my last personal best. So after you catch your personal best, you always want to outdo it. I'm going to go run down some tips too. We kind of went over a lot of the stuff you need and location. This is some tips you can use when you're trying to catch the fish. So you want to slow down your presentation a little slower than you would when you're regularly fishing. Reeling in slightly slower than what you would normally do. Big fish are lazy. They exert a lot more energy to hit something. So if it's moving faster than they want to move, they're not going to go after it. Fishing in a little slower gives you a better chance of catching a bigger fish. So practice that. Another tip here. If you're using bug spray, if you're going night fishing using bug spray or in the day with DEET, DEET is a total turnoff for fish. So do not get DEET on your hands and then on your fishing lures, because that has been scientifically proven that if the fish smells that DEET, it will totally turn it off and it won't hit that lure. So make sure I definitely apply bug spray. There's stuff that doesn't have DEET that works pretty well nowadays, but if you use like the strong DEET stuff, make sure you wash your hands really good. Don't get it on your fishing lure. Try to do it maybe before you go out and have your hands nice and clean, because you don't want, your lure could be right next to a 10-pound bass and it doesn't take it. The older they are, the smarter the fish are too. So that's a little trick for any fishing, but definitely the big ones are smarter. That's why they've survived this long. So you hook a fish and you can tell a big one. You definitely want to make sure you don't lose it, because like I said, I'll tell you what happened now. A few weeks before I caught my personal best there, it could have been bigger than that fish, could have been smaller, but it was definitely 5 pounds or heavier. What happened is I set the hook. I was probably in about 4 feet of water. We were right off kind of like a drop in the water and right off some like lily padded area. And I just casted right next to those lily pads and started reeling it in, and it hit the lure. I set the hook. In my stupidness, I kept my rod up too high, and the fish shot up and jumped, shook his head. I saw the fish. It wasn't far from me. And I was like, oh man. And that was a bummer. I ended up catching a nice smallmouth later, but losing that largemouth hurt. Don't get too much in your own head when you catch something. Try to think what you want to do. If you feel it's a real heavy fish, you don't want to lose it, or any fish. A bass naturally turns when it hits a prey. It'll turn back the other way. So that's why setting the hook really works. So you want to do a quick reel first, have the rod parallel with the water, and then do a sweeping motion to the side to set that hook. And then you want to keep that rod tip down. What I did when I catch a few big fish, I put my rod tip pretty much in the water when I reel it up and get it right up to the boat, and I lip it as quick as I can or net it as quick as I can. Because if you have that rod tip real low in that water, they can't get up and jump a lot of the time. So that's the last thing you want them to do is jump. You also don't want them to run into like brush cover if you're fishing in brush. So you want to make sure that drag's set good so it doesn't pull you right into brush and get hung up. I had a fish once that I brought in, and it was almost 5 pounds. It was like 20 and a half inches long. I remember it was a few years ago. I'm fishing from the bank. He came shooting, or she came shooting out of a fallen tree that was right next to the bank. I was fishing a little, just reeling it in kind of fast. It was a crawdad, a rage tail, I believe. And the fish hit it. I could see it because I fish a lot of clear waters. Not too many murky ponds around here. There are, but I prefer clear water anyways. And they nailed that bait. I saw it, and then I got it up to the bank, but this is like a really woodsy area, and it got hung up with his head half out of the water on this branch, like 1 foot from the shore. I'm like, what the hell? I ripped my shoes off as fast as I could and jumped in that water, and I didn't lose that fish. And it's kind of funny. So my wife's fishing with me at this time. She was fishing that area at this bank, and she went to switch her lure or something, and I'm like, that looks like a good spot. I'm going to go over there. So I ended up catching the fish right where she was fishing. She wasn't too happy about that, but I got a good picture because she was there with me in a measurement and got in there and didn't lose that fish when I ripped my shoes off because I didn't want to lose it. So that's a thing to be careful about too, wherever you're fishing. Know if there's any cover that fish can get tangled in, because you don't want to lose a big fish. It really hurts when you lose a big fish, because I have lost a few, and it's great when you catch them, but terrible when you lose them. You want to make sure that drag is set proper. Another thing is, don't over worry about the fish. I always hear these stories of people fighting these big largemouth bass. Oh, it took me 20 minutes to get them in the boat. A lot of these I think is kind of horse crap, to tell you, because big fish gas out really quick. It's like a big person, they're going to gas out quicker than smaller fish. When I caught that over 6 pounder the other day, it wasn't hard at all to get them in the boat. Like, I saw it was a big fish. I just kept that rod tip down, like I said, reeled it right up and just grabbed it in the lip and pulled it in my kayak. They do gas out pretty quick. Maybe there are some situations, I've never come across it, where you're fighting that fish for 15 minutes, but I think that's just fish talks. Fisherman stories, as they say. Don't worry, they gas out pretty quick. Keep the line tight. Don't let it get loose. You don't want to lose it that way. So keep the line tight. Just keep reeling it towards you. They're going to tire it out. Don't stress too much. And 95% of the time, you're going to get that fish in if you don't make those mistakes. So just keep the rod tip low. Keep the line tight. And if you have a good knot and you have a good fishing line, you should have no problems, hopefully, getting that fish in. And another thing that comes up sometimes, and I don't think anyone really knows the truth to this, if large fish are solitary or they are in like a wolf pack, as they say, multiple. And I've seen it both ways, so I think it could happen either way, depending on the fish itself, I guess. Because one day we were out during the day, and they were right against the bank, and I was in the kayak that time. And I cast and I caught this fish, and when I reeled it out, it was like under like a bush almost in the shade. When I pulled it out, and this was like a good 3 pound, 3.5 pound, I saw a bunch of other fish came out of there, and all these fish were over 3 pounds, good sized fish. So there was some big fish that definitely grouped together. And like I said earlier, with that guy's video that he showed under the water, under that stump, there was multiple big fish. So they do stay in a little pack together sometimes. But I've also gone up, and when I was younger, one of the bigger fish I caught was up in this was up New Hampshire, and I actually rode up this tiny little creek, threw in a little rubber lizard, First cast, bang, I had a 19-inch good size largemouth, especially for New Hampshire. Up that way, they don't get as big. That one was definitely by itself in that situation. There was no other big bass in that spot. It wasn't big enough. They could be up in these little areas where they're just by themselves, or they could be conjugated under some underwater structure or an overhang near a bank. So there might be multiple. So you catch one there, you might be able to catch 2 or 3 that day. Keep it up in that area. Keep trying. Maybe you'll get another one even bigger right after you catch that one. So I think that's about it. So if you follow these tips, you want to do your pre-location research like we talked about. Then you want to go do a little research on that location you pick. Then you want to go and do the fun part, do some fishing, see what the results are. Then you might want to upgrade. This is all on you. Some of your gear, bigger baits, just to try to just catch bigger fish. You do not have to. Like I'm telling you, I fish just a medium rod. I'm fishing 6 to 8 pound line a lot of the times. It's been fine for me. The smaller the line also too. That's the thing to keep in mind. I fish clear water. If you're fishing clear water, these older fish, they are smart. They can see the line sometimes. So the smaller line you can get away with, the better, because the less chance of the fish seeing it. Now, if you're in real murky water, I don't think it matters that much, the line. You could fish straight braid. I don't like doing the leader things like some people do, the fluoro to the braid. I never liked that. I just like having one knot, less issues with one knot, but that's just my preference. If you upgrade your gear or get new gear just for this situation, then like we talked about is when to go. And like I said, you can catch big fish year round. So don't say, oh, spring already passed, I'm not going to go try. You can catch some big fish in the summer, in the spring, the fall, the winter in situations. The largest largemouth that was caught in Massachusetts was caught, I believe it was February or January, and it was over 15 pounds, and it was caught ice fishing. You can catch them year round. They're not just big in the spring. It doesn't make that much difference. It comes down to the location. Do your research on the location. Try to find a place that isn't overfished, a harder place to get into. Like one of the ponds I go to, it's like a rough, basically a dirt trail that I have to take my truck down to get to it. You might have to do a little, off-roading to get some of these places. It depends where you are, but try to find a place that's underutilized and try to get out there where it's not pressured. And if it is a pressured area, that's all you got, try some stuff people ain't tried, different lures, downsize stuff, even though we're talking upsizing baits. If everyone's throwing big swim baits, throw something different, throw something small, finesse fish it. You can catch big fish on small gear and small lures. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. Try some different things. I hope these tips really help you guys. Send me some pictures. Let me know if you end up catching some big fish, personal record for yourself. I hope this helps. You can go out there and do that research and it makes a difference. That'd be great to hear. I like to help you guys out, make your fishing experience more enjoyable and better, and just get out there and have fun. Please like, share, review, subscribe. Send us your pics. Tell me your story. I'll share your storyline if you have a great story. You guys have a great day. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.